I started converting my patterns into kits. Real easy, comes with everything you need. That way, if you want to do some leather working, you don't have to buy all the tools and everything. This will come with your thread and your needles. There's just a couple things I wanted to cover, like how to do proper saddle stitching. Technically, you could sew them together however you want, but if you do the saddle stitching method with 2 needles, it will give you that nice clean look. And you'll notice the slits are on the front, and there's just a 1mm hole on the back pieces. That way these parts will go together real easy while still giving you real clean looking results. We'll talk about all that in a minute. So before we get started talking about the sewing and stuff, I just wanted to mention that I like to give back. So for a while now, I've been giving away my tree diorama sets and my tooling course to kids and like 4-H clubs and things. And these kits I was going to probably include in that. So if you work with kids or like 4-H clubs and such, feel free to shoot me a message. Every once in a while I give some stuff out and just try to help when I can. So vegetable tanned leather is tanned with natural barks and things that makes the leather and the process itself not harmful to the environment. The other nice thing about veg tanned leather is if you have any stamps or anything, or you want to tool something onto the leather, or like a wallet for instance, it'll take those impressions. It also takes dyes and color really well also. So if you have actual leather dye, or I've seen people use even just markers or coffee grounds mixed with a little water, it gives it a tan look. There's all kinds of things you can do to veg tan leather. It really will take those dyes and colors real nice. So before we get into the sewing tutorial here, I'll say I prefer to dye and seal my leather, if I'm going to do that, before I sew. I find that, especially depending on the color of thread you're using, if you sew and put it all together and then dye it, you're going to get a lot of dye soaking into the thread fibers and such. I think it just looks a little better if you dye and seal it first. So the thread I use in my kits is the Main Thread Company thread, and there is a chance it could be a little overly waxed. I do this pretty much always anyway, is I'll grab a rag and just run it through there and pull that excess wax off. That way it won't build up and leave little balls of wax around your holes. Looks a little cleaner. And then when I'm putting the needles on, you're going to put a needle on each end of your thread. If you kind of pinch, that wax really helps hold that nice. I'll pinch it to flatten it out and just kind of press it right through there. And then you're going to want to come back onto the thread, and it helps if you flatten it out a little bit on a nail. And you want to go through that thread with the needle. Grab that end, and what that does is locks it on there, so you won't be fighting it. So we'll do the other side here. Again, if you just go back and forth, flatten it out a little, and then pinch it so it's flat, goes right through. And just come back on the thread. And these needles aren't real sharp. They're leather sewing needles, so they're not going to be real sharp like a standard sewing needle. Locks it on there. So you're going to have a needle on each end of your thread. So I just have a part here. And whenever I start, I always like to come from the front first. That way you're not pulling any leather or bits out. You're pushing, if anything, to the back. And I usually go over the ends of parts like this to have that thread hold those 2 layers together real well. So we have 2 needles here, one on each end, and we're basically going to just figure 8 our way through every one of these holes. And I always come from the back first, because anything that gets pulled through to the front will get pushed back when I come from the front again. But what you want to do is look at the angle of these stitch holes, and that slit has one side is closer to the hole you're coming from and one end is further away. So this thread that we just came up from this hole is going to go up so that when we come down with this one, it will be going to the side that's closest to the hole we're coming from. And that gives us that really nice angled stitch line. And what I'm talking about that is how you see those stitches. It almost looks like a machine did it. Nice angle to each stitch. If we were to hop back and forth, it would look pretty sloppy. But like I said, you can really sew these together however you want. Again, I'm coming from the back. And I'm pulling it to the side of that slit that's furthest away from the hole we're coming from. So when we come down, this stitch goes right to that closest side of that slit. And you can see it's already starting to make that nice angle to those stitches. Pulling it to the side that's furthest away so that this can go right into the closest side. And there are things like stitching ponies and stuff that you can stick this in that has little wooden jaws that hold it so you can have more use of both your hands. You want to snug them up. You don't want to yank on them, and you want that tension to be the same with every stitch. And you can see with each stitch, I always make sure this one is coming down to that closest side of that hole. Because if this was wrapped around, it doesn't matter how you hold that thread. If it's not correct on the right side, it's going to have those stitches hop back and forth and look real sloppy. So when you get to the end, the easiest way is probably just go around and then back stitch. A lot of times I prefer to come in between the two layers and tie a knot so it doesn't have like a double layer of stitches. But however you want to end your stitching is just fine. And then again, I'm going to come around to do a second stitch in that hole, so I'm going around that edge. I just find that looks better. What you can do is go through a hole and come between these two layers, tie a little knot, push it down, maybe put a dab of glue on it, or you can just back stitch. Just go back like 4 stitches and that's going to lock stuff in. Depends on the look that you want. Keep in mind, not as crucial, but when you're back stitching, you're going backwards. So now when you come through from the back, that hole, the closest part to the one you're coming from, is on the top. So I'm going to come through and pull this down so that this thread can get to that closest side of that hole. Not as crucial because you can see it goes pretty straight when you back stitch, but as long as you do it uniformly. I think I'll do one more stitch. And that just locks those in. Some people will burn the little tips of the thread. I just trim them off and call it good. When it comes to sewing, is you can have a small section where it's just to the end and then you got to come back to here. So instead of going there, tying a knot, or back stitching, a little trick I do, and if you're careful it comes out real nice and you wouldn't even know the difference, is I'll go down with just a singular thread and then come back. As long as you know what side you want to fall on as you come through, it'll come out looking real clean. So I want to come out on the top, so I'm as close to the next hole as possible. So when I go through, I just try to maintain on the top of that hole. So I come on the top side, And then next one, the closest one, is the bottom of the hole. So I just try to go to the bottom on that side of the thread. You can see it looks good. It looks as if we went with the double stitch all the way down. And now I don't have to tie a knot, cut my thread, do any back stitching. I can just continue on around to the part here. So the last thing I want to talk about quick is if you need to bend your parts. So this one seems just fine. I don't have to worry about it all. It's usually more crucial with thicker pieces of leather. However, even with this thin stuff, if it looks like it might start splitting, it depends too if you dye and seal it. Sometimes that hardens the surface a little bit, so it's going to want to split. If you need to bend this and it's causing any issues at all, you can come in with like a fine mist bottle and just give it a little spray. And I like to give it a little more right where it's bent and then fade it out so I don't get watermarks. What you don't want to do is run this under water. It's going to overly saturate it and it's going to give you water stains. Another thing you can do is I'll just spray a little water on the corner of my table here. And then I'll dip my finger in it to get just a drop. Kind of work it in just a little bit at a time. Again, you're better off doing a little bit less than too much. You're going to get those water stains. And that just softens the leather up and it allows the fibers to slide inside there. And you'll notice veg tan leather, like with the stamping and stuff, it's actually almost like clay because it takes those impressions really well. But at some point, it just starts to take that bend and hold it. Now that we covered some of those little tips and tricks, you can continue on to the main instructional videos.